Hello and welcome to the Committee of the Whole for the District of Squamish on Tuesday, February 9th. I'm Councillor Armin Herford, and as acting mayor, I'll be chairing this meeting. And as always, we're on the official territory of the Squamish Nation. Can I have someone move the adoption of the agenda, please? Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. Any opposed? Motion carries. First order of business is our electronic participation. Members attending the meeting electronically are required to advise the chair of the meeting of the following circumstances: when the council member disconnects and or reconnects, enters or exits the meeting, so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Council members are to identify themselves when they advise the chair that they wish to be placed on the speakers list. With respect to a vote, council members are only required to state a nay vote. No statement is required if the member is in favor. Council members shall put the telephone or computer on mute unless they wish to speak. Council members shall be involved and participate in the meeting. Council members shall text the chief administrative officer or the corporate officer if they have technical difficulties with their connection. The meeting shall be recessed up to 10 minutes if technical difficulty occurs on the district side, which results in the council member being unable to be connected to the meeting. Secondly, we have got the ministerial order M192, and the staff recommendation is that pursuant to ministerial order M192, the district of Squamish is excluding in-person public attendance at this February 9th, 2021 meeting on the basis that full public attendance in a manner consistent with the public health orders and recommendations cannot be accommodated at this time. And the district is ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability at this meeting by the following means. This meeting is being live streamed. A video of this meeting will be available on the district's website for viewing on an on-demand basis. Someone move for the ministerial order, please. Councillor Stoner and Councillor Race. Opposed, if any? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, Council, we're on to item 4, staff reports, and 4.1 is we've got Mr. Bragg here to kick us off. Okay, who's going to start us?
Hey, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. So I'm just working out how we can get this PowerPoint up.
Okay, it's coming. We'll just pass you to do that in a second here. No? I think you should be good now.
Cal, are you sharing your presentation?
Trying to here. One second here, guys.
There we go. And Cal, if I can just provide a little bit of an introduction while you're getting the last bit of your technical stuff. Yes, just through the chair. Today's presentation that Cal's prepared is really about the objectives and principles of our covered structures and what we're looking to achieve. We're not really into a discussion today about particular design solutions or locations or what they may or may look like. It's really just around objectives and principles today. So if we'll try and stay at that level rather than getting into design solutions, of course, frankly, we're not there yet anyway. So this is just an outline from Cal about how we're going to go about the project. So over to you, Cal.
Okay, thank you, Gary. Apologise for that. Hello, Mayor and Council. So reiterating what Gary just said, we're here to run through the downtown covered structures. And we're focused on the objectives and the principles and not so much the design and the locations at the moment to help us drive through to create the product here at the end of the day. The objective we're focused on is increasing the year-round and seasonal use of Squamish parks and open spaces by the public through the use of covered structures. Bit of background of where we're at the moment. We all know there's a lack of community use covered spaces, particularly in downtown area. We've received varying input, information, feedback from community groups, individuals in the district. We've got a starting budget of $110,000, and this is really the opening of more structures down the track of what we're seeing. But just bear in mind that the budget right now that we're working with is $110,000. And again, to reiterate, we're focusing on the objective and the principles to create this product at the moment. The opportunities we've identified is expanding the current uses of the park. For example, community events as a public meeting place, the playgrounds and the physical and mental health and wellness, which is just imperative in these times at the moment. We've also have an opportunity to increase the current users of the parks. For example, as an eating area, we need more eating areas. Focusing the ability for vulnerable citizens, families, elderly and singles. And if we can increase the users of the park, that'd be ideal. We can also increase the volume of the current park use, leveraging the current existing use. Also improving activation in the experience, and this is the ability to enliven the area by leveraging high traffic locations. Focusing along pathways near playgrounds and walking distance to shops and businesses. And also as an opportunity to work with COVID at the moment. And it's not just now, it's also post-COVID as well. The principles we focused on, there's 9 of them. Flexibility is one of the key ones, where it's designed and built for a wide variety of uses and activities. They need to be adaptable, needs to meet the changing needs of the community, need to be mobile. Needs to be constructed and moved as required. Age friendly, and this is from babies to aged citizens. Equity, it needs to foster social inclusion. It needs to be accessible. There's physical accessibility as well with no barriers. Everyone needs to feel included. Needs to support, have a connection with the local economy. Needs to be robust. Obviously needs to last its life cycle with minimum maintenance, and needs to be safe, which is not much needs to be said about the safe factor. So on the design and construction criteria, we've dove in a little bit. So the number one thing here is really, these need to be rain and snow friendly, and they're created in a public space. That's the focus, the main item here. The design needs to be activating. It needs to be seen from the street. It's not something that can just be put into the center of a park. It needs to have a view line. It needs to have a sight line. It needs to be designed to be inviting as well. We need to use sustainable building materials, as we do with all district projects. Needs to be transportable, and by transportable, it's not just picking up and moving it in 4 or 5 years' time. It's looking at this if community groups or events need to use it, if it's a short-term movement. Accessible to power and water, this includes lighting. It also needs to fit in with the OCP, the bylaws, and the streetscape guidelines, and also ultimately built in budget, schedule, and the quality of the district. The other item that we're focusing on is, it's not just a covered space, it's what's under the covered space. So obviously this is a big point. The covered seating areas is large, but on the flip side, it'd be nice to have them movable. Security is an item that we're looking at as well, but if events come in and it needs to be an open space, then it needs to be looked at as well. Having a flat hardscape ground, we know that the ground in Squamish, particularly in the parked area, in parks, are basically year-round damp. And it's not just the flat hardscape under the covered space, it's how do we get there as well. And then also, again, as we noted before, water and electricity connections here. So the overall timing, it's a 1-week process. I think the hardest or the difficult part is creating, what this product is, and that's over the next 3 weeks, if we can work through that. The tender process is around 3 weeks and the construction is around 3 weeks. So just reiterating the point, we're after the principles here. And the objectives, as opposed to diving into the detail and location. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bragg, get you to take down your, there we go. Thank you. Council, I'd like to remind you that we're looking for to work on the objectives and principles of this project, and we'll try to stay as far from the weeds as we can as we work our way through this. So, but I will open up to questions from council this time. Followed by Councillor Stoner.
Chair, am I on? Regarding under design and construction criteria, rain and snow friendly public space protection, I wonder whether we might, at least in some locations, give explicit attention to wind protection as well.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Anderson. That's a good point. The answer is yes. So we can look at putting some wind. You know, it comes down to location and possibly within the design with some walls, but we can definitely add that as a in scope here too.
Thank you.
Councillor Stoner.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on one of the design principles around or criteria around accessible to power and water. And I think from my perspective, that's a nice to have, but not necessarily a need to have across all of these. And so I'm just curious what if that is like if those criteria are like things that we expect to have in all of these covered spaces, or if they're kind of give and take.
Through the chair, yes, good question. That feedback was from community groups saying if there's events in there, they need access to plug in for electrical items. Lighting is another area here. You know, again, if we're looking at year-round use, do we have some lighting in the evenings? Again, we haven't got resolved answers on here, but we've gone through the feedback from the community, and this is what we're getting from them. So.
Yeah, I guess I'll just reiterate. I think a nice to have, but I think if we're just creating a small covered space next to a playground so that families can hang out and enjoy being in that park space, that it doesn't necessarily need to be all these covered spaces that have access to those services.
Okay, I've got Grace followed by Elliott, and I'm going to go last two.
I'm on?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. So the one word I didn't see there in the list of principles was neighborhood hub. And I've been sort of drawn into a discussion about that lately in a couple of fronts. And so it's probably inherent in those various principles, but I think one of the things we want to focus on for these is a series of neighborhood hubs. In the OCP, we've talked about over the last couple of council terms about creating neighborhood hubs in different developments and new development areas and so forth. And those will take different forms, but essentially it's among other things, it's a gathering place for peoples. And so it's kind of that, you know, I agree with the principles, but overall, what we're trying to do is attract people to a spot where they can communicate with each other. And so I think we want to kind of keep that as an overarching principle. And also then, from my perspective, without getting into discussion of design and location, to me it seems like it's possible then that they're standalone, or they may be built in conjunction with other buildings in development, public or private, and be kind of add-on. So going forward, I think, you know, there's going to be different conversations about this in the future I can think of, but these may be different sizes and locations, and these will be scattered around the community. But I think that's, from my perspective, that's one of the real overriding reasons for these, is to provide just for that particular neighborhood some kind of a hub for people. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn.
So, Cal, there were two line items in the restart budget for covered spaces, one for 110,000, but there's another one for like parklets or something else. What's the difference between these two?
That's a good question through the chair here. The parklets, from a high level point, it's a covered space for the public. Breaking them down, the parklets were focused on, say, for example, Cleveland, where a car space is removed or it's literally just off the footpath, and that's kind of deemed as the parklet. Whereas the a general covered space in the park was probably more so where it's attached next to a playground or it's put on the end where it's near a parkway, sorry, a pathway. So I think the definition there will be split between these. I mean, it's $110,000 can go to either one of them because it's still covered public space. So the split between the parklet, which is more along, say, Cleveland, or something that goes into a park. That's probably the best way to describe the definition difference there.
One of the things that principles around age friendly, and it's designed for every age group. I think one of the things we want to keep in mind is this year-round use, and I just don't want us to forget about actually covering a playground, not putting something off to the side. And I know that, you know, adults don't play on a playground, but they stand under a cover and watch their kids play on a playground, and so do grandparents. So I don't think with the budget we have that these can be like all singing, all dancing for every single person. They're only going to go so far. So I agree with Councillor Stoner that the water and the electricity is nice to have. And I can see that probably people think we can build a lot of these. I don't know how many we can build for $110,000. But to me, it's about going to places where people already are and accentuating what's there. So, you know, looking at busy places in the community and then improving them even more so that they can be used year round. So that's something that I don't want to lose sight of, is not necessarily creating a new space, but making a current space better.
Thank you. Councillor Pennington next.
Yeah, thank you. And building on some of what my colleagues have said, the one question I have is what hours of the day? I'm assuming we don't want use too late at night. And just thinking of OCM, I believe that the lights and power and so on are on a timer, so they automatically shut off. And so they're, you know, sort of purposely designed not to have access all night, maybe all year, but not necessarily all night. So I think that's probably something we want. I also agree that I don't know that we want power and water at all of these venues. And I think that is really important to think about, because to the degree we do put in power, I think we have to be very conscious of what we're hoping that power is going to serve, depending on what sort of performance you have in mind. You need to design your power specifically so people don't get electrocuted, and that becomes more of an issue when you have lots of performers. And so just being very aware of what uses we want in these. Is it just a covered playground, or do we expect this to be a new performance venue? I think will really dictate some of those things. The other piece, sort of along the lines of wind and so on, you know, is it just a cover over top, or is it a side? Because a back wall or something can be very useful for security, as well as wind and rain blockage and so on. And so I think that gets again to what exactly are we hoping people are going to do in these spaces. And I don't know if we need more of a discussion on what we want these spaces to be used for. But just putting a cover up and a couple electrical outlets will serve some uses, but a whole lot of uses won't be well served.
We're having someone, everyone just check that they're muted, please. We're getting some back and clipping, although I think we got your points there, Councillor Pennington. I'm going to put myself on the list, and we're going to go back to Councillor Race. I think I'd like to reiterate a few points that have been brought up already. The wind protection, I think, is a key consideration at different places in Squamish that will make it far more the space far more used all year. So that's helpful. I also think if I take a step back even, and I'm thinking about these covered spaces, this is about year-round utilization of our our parks and increasing that, and we've identified covering them is helpful. So, but I also think that in some of the spaces, maybe some of the playgrounds would benefit from just having the darkness removed. Maybe like just lights itself at a playground could be very helpful in some cases if if the all singing, all dancing, covered, lit, plumbed space isn't in the cards. And I want to make sure that we can capture those, whether this feels like the project for those pieces to come in as well. And I know that even having fresh water at some of our parks is something that we've been asked for. So I know that we're into we're trying to stay out of the weeds, and I'm going to be zooming further back out. But if those pieces could be identified as quick wins and the appropriate action to take in a park, then I think we should be able to action those, and hopefully as part of this. I would like to see existing. I think Mary Elliott made the point about the sort of increasing the usage of our existing spaces, and to me, I'd love to see a covered playground. One of our playgrounds covered and ideally lit, which isn't putting electricity there necessarily for performance, but when it's dark, when the kids get home from school, it'd be great to be able to have more options of where to take them. I think that would be a huge win. And I've been noting what's under these covered spaces. Maybe some of the things that we already have is the point that I'd like to make around the parks and the various playgrounds and play areas. And of course, performance space, places to gather, to have meals, have a picnic. These are all possible uses as well, but I don't think that under that we should expect that each of these has a square off like multi-purpose slab of land under it. So, but some of them, maybe that is appropriate to be adaptable to various uses. But my first priority in my mind would be those playgrounds, whether it's the playground itself or a viewing area for the parents and grandparents to watch the kids run and splash inside the wet. But I'll leave it there. I'll go to Councillor Race and then Councillor Stoner.
I just want to say it's a bit difficult to hear you, Armand. Just so you know. I caught most of that, but maybe 80% of it.
In the interim, I'll talk louder, but we're going to make some adjustments to the new equipment here to make it all in the name of making things better, not. Okay, thanks for that feedback. Councillor Race, we had trouble hearing you last time, Councillor Race, so I'll give you.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't explain that. I'm sitting right here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So it was something that the mayor brought up, and that was the budget issue. And when I think about it, $100,000 is not going to go very far. And I would prefer to see us really, if we're serious about this, to not make a bunch of small ones, but to give a little bit of thought to them. I mean, the last time we did covered bus stops, I think it cost us about $30,000 a bus stop. And so, we could get about 2.5 at the bus stop rate in the $100,000. But the other thing that brought to mind is back in one of my earlier terms, we started just sort of upgrading the various parks around the community, and we took on 2 a year. And I forget the budget number, but it's like somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000, I think. And for that, we got playground equipment and some landscaping. And after, I think it took us 5 years, but after 5 years, we had all the parks covered. And frankly, I'm envisioning something similar to this. And I'd invite staff to consider, I know we're not yet budgeting for the future, but I'd invite staff to consider scaling this over a couple of years, getting budget requests in for following years, And maybe looking at something that's a real add-on to the parks, because you're not going to get much, as this has been pointed out, for $100,000 over 10 parks. And there may be other public spaces as well that we want to consider. So I think I'd be inclined to go that way and start off and take on a couple a year. And I'd leave it to staff to figure out how many and what location, but not consider this a one-shot event.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor, Mr. Buxton, do you have a?
Yes, I just, through the chair, I think we have approached this as a multi-year project. If I recollect, I think we have money proposed in next year's budget as well. And correct if there's just sort of a bit of a conversation going off here with respect to the budget. Is it 110 for the parklets and 118 for the covered structures? Do we have a much larger overall number in the budget for both parklets and the covered structures? Oh, here's Miss Boxrod. Maybe she can handle that.
Hi, through the chair. So yes, we have 110,000 for the parklets, and it's 220 for the covered structures. 110 in 2021, 60 and 60 in the 2 subsequent years. So 2022 and 2023, and that's for the covered structures.
Thank you.
I have a quick question just on this topic. So the outcome of this meeting, are we going to see a presentation or the would be of this over those 3 years that we've budgeted? Is that sort of the next step, just to understand that?
But no, I mean, to the chair, no, I think the intent now is to get on with the design and get things built and constructed as fast as possible. I don't think we were planning to bring the designs back to council.
Okay, just wanted to clarify. No. Councillor Pettingill, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is this strictly for semi-permanent, meaning, you might only move them once every few seasons, structures, or would we consider a shed or at OCM pavilion, for example, getting a bunch of portable chairs and tables and tents and having that sort of ready and available? So if you want to hold an event, you don't need a vehicle to bring all the stuff there. It's just already there. You sign it out and use it for the day. So it's that sort of more basic infrastructure that allows for outside events quite easily.
Through the chair, it was more keeping it as wide as we possibly can. The option A there, where literally it's a structure that can be moved if it needs to. If there's an event for the day, it needs to be picked up and moved out of there, or if it needs to be moved in 5 years because we deem it not a demand area, it needs to be shifted across. That was the focus. The chairs and all that sort of item under the actual structure itself, we haven't dove in enough, but again, it needs to really, if we're going for a wide open use here, we need to have chairs under there. It's covered seating space, but also movable for events and community groups.
Thank you. Marilyn.
I'm generally supportive of what's here, and I think the idea of movable seating is really important and future-proofs this. May present some challenges for things disappearing, but that's not to say we shouldn't try. I think it's a good start. The way that the budget's allotted, we'll be able to test our ideas with a few structures before we sort of move on in our budget cycle. So we'll look forward to seeing this done. It looks like it can be up in 9 weeks is what your timeline says.
We can do it.
All right, thank you.
Yes, Councillor Stoner.
I too am generally supportive of the direction that's presented. I'm excited to hear that this can be up and done in 9 weeks. Mr. Bragg, that's impressive. So I look forward to seeing them available in our community before the end of winter. And I do like the phased approach that we have. I think I'll just reiterate, as much as we can keep this nimble and simple, then let's do that. And as opposed to trying to build something large and kind of solid in its place. But it sounds like that is part of the criteria and the guidelines. So excited to see that in there. And yeah, looking forward to seeing those in action. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor French.
Thanks, Chair. I too just wanted to chime in and say that I'm generally supportive of what was presented by staff, and there's been some excellent feedback at the council table here. I like taking the wind into account where we have wind conditions, and I also agree that power, lighting, and anything electrical falls into the nice to have as opposed to need to have for this project. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
I think it is important that while we have an arts and culture and heritage strategy adopted by council last year, that with such projects as what we're discussing now, that we be careful or mindful to situate this initiative within that strategy. And there is a whole section of recommendations regarding spaces for cultural events, but also things like exhibits. I'll highlight exhibits from past experiences. There are some limitations on availability of spaces for secure places, in particular also for wind, for exhibits, for art or other kinds of presentations. But my main point is that we be always vigilant to refer and situate our initiatives within that arts, cultural, and heritage strategy and its set of tactics. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Do we have anyone else? Councillor Race?
Yeah, thank you. I generally do support this strategy, but to be frank, when I saw the words unmovable, or movable rather, I was thinking of something more like the canoe shed on the park, for example, is movable. We insisted on that because we hadn't designed or built the park yet. So it can be moved. But it's not, I was not thinking of a bunch of pop-up tents that we can kind of fold up and carry on to the next park, to the next event. I think we want to take the opportunity to make something that is really a long-lasting park asset. And so it's a little less, in my mind, it's a little less movable than perhaps some of the other descriptions. And seating and tables and stuff like that, I think the reality is that they have to be pretty indestructible. And not the kind of thing that can walk away by themselves. So I'll leave it to staff to deal with those things.
Thank you. Councillor Pengel, and then I'll put myself on the list.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm generally supportive of this. I also agree that I think within the context of our budget and what we already have in our community, water and power are less of a priority. I would one thing we haven't talked about is washroom facilities of some sort, and that's the one piece that might be a bit of a gap for me. It's not, maybe it's tangential, but I think the ability for to have access to a washroom makes parks a lot more usable, covered or not. So that's the one piece I might consider. And I personally do like the idea of chairs, tables, the sorts of things that make the spaces more usable. I know that causes lots of logistic challenges for us, but within our budgets, it's maybe a more affordable way to get some activation.
Thank you, Councillor Finnegan. I'm also supportive of the general direction. I think that Councillor Race hit on that transportable, that piece that is jumping. I think that might be like means exactly is a bit tough. So whether it's repurposable or movable to another space or something that is more temporary can be moved in the shorter term. So I think that I much prefer something that is adaptable and can be moved down the road if that's deemed necessary, but something that actually has that isn't movable in sort of that short term or week to week or whatever else that could mean. So that bit was a bit ambiguous to me, and I read it more as repurposable and movable to another park at some point down the line. I also think the water and electricity and coverage is would be amazing if that could all happen in one, but isn't a deal breaker if it doesn't happen. And as I mentioned in previous comments, even if only the lights happen somewhere, it would increase even if it was only the lights that happened, that would still increase the usage, the usability of the space. And also, if water becomes available in more places, that is also something that has been a limiting factor in some of these parks. And thank you, Councillor Pettingill, for bringing up the washrooms. I do think that having more access to washrooms, even if it's just a porta potty or continued expansion of our Trail Hub program that puts these washroom facilities in various places in our community, I'm supportive of any increase we can find in that where there is a hole in that service. So, and I think there's plenty of opportunities to do that. And that again increases the usability of the park space, which I feel is the main. As much as we're talking about covered structures today, and we're trying to stay out of the weeds, I want to hire again. Which to me, this is about that really activating and increasing usability of our park spaces. And I think those things will do that. And I think we're on generally the right track. So I look forward to seeing. To the day 9 weeks from now when I can sit and have a coffee in one of these structures, whatever they look like. So I think that, Mr. Bragg, do you have enough feedback from us to move forward? Is there anything you'd like clarity on?
Through the chair, quick answer, no. That's been great. Thank you for your feedback. It's actually spotlighted a few items here and definitely helped us focus to create a pretty cool product here. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Council, for keeping on the right level of that. And according to my math, we're slightly ahead of schedule. So let's keep that theme going as we go into the next topic. We're going to have Mr. Buxton come and give us community planning 2021 projects update.
Thank you through the chair. I think Mr. Valanishka should also be online here, and as usual, unless he's got anything different, I don't think we plan to go through the list unless he has some highlights, and then we can entertain council's questions. So if Jonas is on.
I'm here.
There we go.
Are you okay with that format, Jonas?
Yeah, that sounds good, Chair. I just have a few things that I'd like to highlight in the application list. So we've got one thing that's not on here. We received, I believe last week, is the sub-area plan application for the Crumpet Woods area. So now that's just been received. And then just wanted to note a few things. I had to be away at the kind of end of last week when the agenda was put together. So there's just a few notes that I didn't get to. And one is, under the District Law 509, 510 OCP amendment, the status needs to be updated. It still says that public engagement needs to occur there. I just want to note that that's an old comment, and that's already occurred. And so the next thing that's going to be happening is we'll be bringing that application to council for a decision probably in early spring, as the agenda room allows. And I think, under Waterfront Park, on Waterfront Landing North, the comments on the status are incorrect. I think they doubled up from the previous line. So on the Waterfront Park, we're working through the habitat compensation issues, and it's just something entirely different there. And at the last, I think the last time that the committee discussed this list of applications, committee requested an update on where the affordable housing projects may be in the pipeline. So I just wanted to report quickly on that. We have currently in construction 308 units, and that's essentially the seniors housing project on 3rd Avenue and the Buckley affordable housing on Buckley Avenue. In building permit review, we have 2 projects now, and that is the Waterfront Landing Phase 3B and C, which has 55 units, and then the Garibaldi Springs Golf Course Phase 1, which has the 8 cottage units for affordable housing. So that's in the immediate pipeline. The rest of the projects are either in development permit review or rezoning process. And that's about it.
Mayor, before we take, we've got Mayor Elliott followed by Councillor Race. I just wanted to remind council that our intent is not to go through the list and get too in-depth in each, and we'll try to keep it as a high level as we can. Going through this so we can stay on both because that's our role and so we can stay on schedule. So Mayor Elliott, I saw you first and Councillor.
Yeah, the one thing that caught my eye, Mr. Melniskis, is that the oceanfront development has a number of different applications coming forward. And I wonder if there's an opportunity to actually bring it to council as a whole, and maybe not look at all those different things piecemeal, but understand how they all fit together. Because this council hasn't dealt with anything in the oceanfront.
Yes, thank you. That's a good point. I think we're going to try and do that for the most part, with maybe the exception. One of the applications is just a development permit for the sort of brewery, public house, and their presentation center that might come in separately. There's a big housekeeping amendment that's being proposed in terms of zoning changes, so we're going to bring all that stuff together in one package. And then there's also an application for BC Rail properties to be rezoned, which is also a little bit separate because it's outside of the PDA, the phase development agreement area. But I'm sure that the housekeeping changes are probably going to come in first. And at that point, I think that will be a good introduction to this council around what's happening, you know, what the history was, and any discussions from there on in terms of the BC Rail will be hopefully informed by that first conversation.
Thank you. Just a follow up to that. So if we're opening up some housekeeping amendments, does that give us the opportunity to bring this development up to current standards in terms of our climate action plan, and that sort of thing that weren't captured in the original agreement? Exactly.
There is going to have to be some negotiation in terms of, you know, what the applicant wants to change in the plan and the PDA, and in terms of what the district wants to bring up to current standard, for sure. And those conversations are already happening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Race.
Thank you. I just on two different topics. One is on one of the oceanfront applications. The first one, which is 2020-68 for the presentation area, but it talks about what looks like sort of a brewery pub structure. And I'm wondering, first of all, where it's located, just out of curiosity. And secondly, does the PDA cover this in the sense that there are no occupancy permits given until the park is completed?
So through you, Chair, I believe this application is sort of close to the park, to the oceanfront park location on the southern portion of the peninsula. The PDA restricts occupancy for residential units, and this is not a residential application.
Thank you. And the second question was with respect to the very last item on the list, which is the Chikai Fan development. We just haven't heard anything about that for a while. As the rest of council may know, but we granted third reading to that, subject to a series of conditions around the barrier, among other things. And I'm just wondering if there's any progress in that or any idea when that we might get through to considering adoption.
Yes, through you, Chair. So there has been a lot of work going on in the background in terms of hazard mapping and risk assessment. And that's going to be the next thing coming back to council, I believe, for an update. So all the hazard related information and management has to get sorted out before we come back for adoption. And you know, there were a number of assumptions made at third reading and at the public hearing in terms of what that barrier will look like and what level of risk it will, or what level of protection it will provide. So we're still making sure that, you know, none of those assumptions are changing as we're presenting new information.
I'm sorry, did you say when you expect this back, or any idea?
Mr. Buxton might know when the hazard information is coming back to council. I know it's, I know it will be soon. I'm just not sure exactly when.
Soon is fine. I'm good with that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, thank you. Just Mr. Valnescus, can you just remind us, there's a lot of projects in here, some big ones, some small ones, how we're prioritizing? Is this one giant queue and we're just going through them in the order we see here, or is it split up? Or?
That's a good question through you, Chair. We are triaging a little bit, so smaller projects, you know, that don't take a lot of resources, that are not complex, are usually get into the process sooner than bigger complex projects. And other than that, it's by, you know, the date of receiving the application. Sometimes it's about the planner that may have an expertise in that area or have had previous applications related to that property. So it's a little bit fluid, but generally it's by when the application was submitted, how complex it is, and then whether the right person is available to take that on at that time.
Okay, thank you. And then Chair, are we also talking at all about the building and planning projects list? I guess that's page 9, or are we talking about that after?
I was treating this as one piece, or do you staff like us to stay to the, no, it's all. Yeah,
it's all one piece.
Okay, so I just had a comment. I don't think this is the time to get into it, but I wanted to flag it, and I've alluded to earlier. I did look at our community action plan again, and I am noticing we have, to my mind, specific targets for new buildings, and you know, some language around how we're accountable to those targets and so on. And so, especially in some of the things in the planning section, I'm interested in seeing how we're managing that interaction.
Could you clarify, Councillor Pettingill, what is the question?
Well, it's just more of a comment. I'm just sort of flagging that I'm going to be looking for the interaction between that climate action plan and some of these, like the zoning bylaw updates and the smart growth neighborhood incentive, these sorts of bigger things that are going to result in a lot of new buildings. How does that align with the targets in our climate action plan?
Mr. Buxton, go ahead. Yes,
I mean, we've had some discussions about that internally based on these recurring questions, Councillor Pettingill. That sort of methodology just frankly just doesn't exist right now. There isn't any robust methodology to look at things like neighborhood plans and zoning amendments and produce any sort of projection or estimation of impact with respect to carbon. I mean, it just doesn't, that technology, that assessment technology just doesn't exist right now. It's just not available. There are certain elements that we can track, and we can track the impacts, but to try and project that, that technology, those methods just don't exist. And if they do, they're so conjectural, they're of no value whatsoever. They make so many assumptions, they're of no value. So there isn't going to be anything coming back with respect to how we can project or estimate at the zoning or a sub-area plan or a neighborhood plan, because that just doesn't exist right now.
If I
go ahead.
Yeah, so it may be, I don't know if this is the time for the conversation, but just a conversation about what I have in mind at some point. It does say in Big Move 6 that our primary measurement of our success will be emissions and energy. And there are emissions targets for the other 5 big moves. And so I'm wondering how we square what the climate action plan says with these other plans we have estimated based on our current number of buildings, what our emissions are. And so to my mind, it's, a plan projects or allows for 300 buildings. It's a 1 ton per building, and it's a very imprecise measurement, but it's on par with the targets we already have in our plan. And so that's what we've got. And so I'm thinking in around that level. And I think that's what the climate action plan that we approved says. And so if we're going to do something different, I'd just like to understand that a bit.
Councillor Pringle, thank you for the feedback. I do think that the place for this would be around, discussing this would be around a community climate action plan update and how that goes through. And I'm sure that at some point soon we'll have that. But I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole at this time. So I'm going to move on to Councillor Stoner and followed by Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Through the chair, just a few clarifying questions. There's a number of projects that are highlighted in yellow. My assumption is that those are the prioritized projects based off of our priority list. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then I'm just curious, how long, is there a timeline for how long projects can sit in between readings? Or is that just kind of like they just sit there once readings start?
There is usually, if there is nothing happening with the application, we put an inquiry with the applicants, and if they can't show that there's progress being made, we do have a policy. I think it's 6 months or something, and then they can get 1 extension, and then that's it. But if there is some files that are quite complex, and at the end is when it gets quite heavy with addressing multiple requirements, if there is progress in those cases, then the file continues to be active.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then my last question was just around one specific line item, which is the harbor air proposal. And I know we chatted about this last time it came forward. I was so surprised that this is a totally delegated DP. I'm just wondering if staff can explain how that's the case.
I believe it was based on the area of the dock. So I'm a little bit fuzzy just because I haven't looked at that file for a while, but it definitely is delegated, and I think it's either the type of development permit area it's in, or it's the size of the project.
Okay, I would, next time this comes forward, if it's possible, get a bit of clarification there, because I think I remember from our last conversation, the structure itself of building a dock, I think, is delegated. I think that's included in the DPA, but I don't know if it's actually envisioned as seaplanes coming and going as part of that dock. And I think that's where my confusion was, as to building the dock was part of the DP. Well, it was like within the DP guidelines, but was the use actually as intended? So that's one that still is a flag for me. I don't know if others remember differently.
If I can respond. Chair. So the use is certainly permitted in the zone. So it's the development permits, don't really deal with the use. It's all about the physical aspects of the proposal. What I can do is follow up after this meeting to council with the explanation of why it's delegated.
That'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Chair, I have 2 items in the active development projects list I'd like to ask about. Firstly, 1450 Highway 99, just south of the Shell station. It's currently occupied by Skytech Yarding and affiliated logging heavy equipment companies. Council is aware that for the Employment Lands Modeling Project, staff that is planning and economic development have done some review of various parcels around the district that are currently in industrial use. This one is a type of use that has been identified as in short supply, prominent outdoor storage requirements for the current uses. So my question is, are the implications of a potential land use shift here being noted by staff for purposes of inventorying and adjusting inventory of medium industrial land in particular?
Through you, Chair. So yes, that piece of land was not designated as medium industrial in our OCP, and so when we did the employment space model, it was treated as light industrial, and it's the development permit is not triggering any changes to land use.
Thank you. My second question, Chair, is regarding the development proposals, rezoning and development proposals at Bailey and Cleveland, or near Cleveland on Bailey. My question is whether staff can speak to the timing of our proposed downtown entrance study and downtown transportation model initiative relative to processing rezoning and development applications at Bailey and Cleveland.
Yes, through you, Chair, that is a critical component of considering that application, and that's partially why it's been a while, since we received it and when we can move forward with that application.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Elliott, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot one. It is. Hold on a second. I lost the address. 38123 Cleveland. That's the Corsa Cycles building. So that started to be reviewed in October, and I know the lot on the corner, opposite corner of that intersection, we reviewed a few times, and it's part of that Winnipeg Cleveland designation as a gathering space or sort of like a community square. So how does staff look at these two proposals in terms of trying to build out those four corners, given that they're all going to develop at different times? What's the process, and how does ADP look at it when it goes to ADP?
So we are paying attention to that. This particular application, I believe, is with the applicant. We received it a while back, and it hasn't progressed very much, partially because of the complexity of that site, and obviously it's currently zoned for a lower density because of its size, and that is the exact reason why the district rezoned those properties to assign a lower FAR. So through the rezoning process, that kind of a thing would have to be resolved, which is what is going to happen on that corner, and how will we treat not just Cleveland but also Winnipeg.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple quick questions from myself, and I think we sort of touched on this issue with a few of the earlier questions, but I always find it interesting when we have to consider staff and or council needs to consider an issue based viewed on an old regulation, so say previous OCP. So some of the questions earlier about, I think it was Councillor Stoner was asking about the timing and how long something can sit dormant. I'm curious about, I guess, how staff looks at bringing these applications into a space where they can be judged against our most current policies, and sort of where those opportunities exist and where we can create, potentially create more opportunities to do that, so that we're all, the community's all on the same page and playing for the same plans.
So that's a good question. Not an easy one to answer because every case is a little bit different with applications. I think it's fairly rare that we get into a situation where there has been no movement on the application whatsoever, and those cases we have more leverage to then, if there's no variances involved, let's say it's a development permit, to make sure that the applicants commit to the new standards. Other than that, as long as the application is submitted and the applicant is progressing, doing work that they can show evidence of, they are under the zoning regulations and the OCP guidelines of that day. That doesn't apply to the step code. So if someone's going through a DP process, it doesn't matter when they submitted their DP, it's when they submit their building permit application.
Okay. Thank you. Council, any further questions? See, almost. Councillor Anderson, go ahead.
Chair, I just wish to clarify that will we be moving on to the planning projects, and we're just wrapping up the development project applications?
Sorry, Councillor Anderson, we're treating them all one and the same. So if you'd like to go ahead with your question, then please do so.
Thank you. Then I have a question regarding the sub-area planning process proposed for the Garibaldi Estates area. First of all, has staff determined a geographic scope for this proposed Garibaldi Estates plan?
Through you, Chair, not at this point. We will do that once we start the project, and that'll be one of the first things to complete.
And potentially taking a second look at the map, that it might be conceivable that the areas between Government Road and Highway 99 south of Mamcom Road, that is the trailer park and substantial park area or access to park area, might conceivably be considered. Thank you.
For that comment.
I wonder if I could follow up in asking whether, and this is during the Loggers Lane East sub-area planning process, we didn't identify explicitly, to my knowledge, the prospect for a neighborhood hub. And given its proximity to Brennan Park was likely the reason. But in this area of Garibaldi Estates, that might be an interesting topic to consider in a planning process. And I'm aware that there are some private lands and discussions that may perhaps be brought forward in conversation and public engagement. So my question is, could we introduce the concept of a neighborhood hub to be addressed as part of the terms of reference for a sub-area plan for this area?
Through you, Chair, that's a very good observation. Definitely, that's the plan. We actually do have students from UBC who are interested in a project here in the district. And so they have been tasked to kind of look into what is a successful neighborhood hub look like. And they're focusing into that area in Garibaldi Estates. So we're hoping that that project will also feed into the Garibaldi Estates neighborhood plan.
Thank you. Chair, I have a follow-up question. There are two policy, if you like, initiatives in the list for planning and building projects, the employment lands model and the heritage protection framework. And the question I'd like to ask for both of them, and this has been discussed briefly last fall with respect to the employment lands model, the question, will these be brought forward to council for discussion? That is at the stage where terms of reference and scope are being addressed. I believe last year we did hear from you, Mr. Vilaniskis, that the employment lands model implementation plan might be brought forward to council, but I'd also like to ask the same relative to the heritage protection framework initiative.
Through you, Chair, yes, the implementation for employment lands will be brought back to council for endorsement. We're working on the draft right now. The heritage protection framework is just a scoping exercise this year, so it's meant to be a fairly small project in terms of staff time. And we were going to go ahead with that as soon as we have budget for it, to get a consultant to do the scoping, and the results of that would then come to council for future budget considerations.
Thank you, Mr. Beleniskis. Chair, I do have another brief question, but that's just at your discretion if we have time.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I'm going to do a quick poll of the others. We have about 5 or 6 minutes left on this topic, so to see if there are any other questions, and then if there's time, I'll come back to you if that's. Council, anyone else in our last few minutes here with Mr. Beleniskis? All right, Councillor Anderson, the floor is yours.
Thank you. The question is in relation to the Downtown Streetscape Standards Initiative. There is a project description, and there's an item there that I was looking for that I think is of interest, and that is to establish some standards, or to probe them at least, for public art and interpretive kiosks. And why I ask this is that there are and have been here in Squamish some safety issues and durability issues relating to such installations. And I'm wondering whether we can confirm that they might be addressed within the scope of addressing standards.
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure if that is the best place for something like that. I think we already have some standards when it comes to public art. We have a process for how we consider. I'm just not sure that the streetscape standards are going to be more about furniture and size of infrastructure that is, for public's access. So I'll take that comment back to my team, and we'll see what we can do with that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beleniskis, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Council, I think that wraps up our discussion. And we're 5 minutes ahead of schedule, but we're going to add that to our break. So, Mr. Beleniskis, was there anything in particular you're looking for us that you have, or from us that you haven't had yet? You're good. Okay.
Thank you. I'm good.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, staff. And we are in recess. We'll see everyone back at 3 o'clock. All right. Thank you. Welcome back to Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, February 9th. We're on item 4-3, Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative Steering Committee. And we have staff to present. There he is.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Can you hear us?
Oh, I can hear you loud and clear. Much better now that you've got that speaker or whatever it is you have there. I can hear you a lot better than earlier. So that's very good.
All right, we're moving forward. So take it away, Mr. Jeffery.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak again around some of my favorite subjects, procurement and social procurement, especially the Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative. It's an initiative that's pretty dear to my heart because I was kind of there at the beginning, and it'd be nice to take a deep dive back into it. So one of the reasons we're meeting today is to discuss, the goal is that Mayor Elliott and myself be appointed to the Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative Steering Committee as representatives for the district, and that Councillor Blank be appointed as alternate to Mayor Elliott. So a quick overview on what the Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative is hopefully you had a chance to look through that flyer that was included in the package. It's just a 2-pager on kind of the work they're doing and what they're involved in now. So it's a low-cost, high-value resource that provides local governments like ourselves with the support and expertise we need to integrate social procurement practices. So this will build on the policy that we've just developed. It'll help the steering committee move the initiative forward and get a network with other local governments who have been doing this for a couple of years now. So the purpose, vision, and mission of the initiative is, again, it supports local governments, First Nations in implementing social procurement, provides access to develop in-house tools and skills to implement social procurement. And it's really about, improving the health of our communities and the strength of our economies, especially in the COVID days that we're currently in. So it's a great resource for that. This is kind of just a snapshot of what we get. So there's a bunch of webinars that they've already done. We get access to expert consultants who have been involved in the initiative for the last couple of years. They can kind of worked with us on walking through community engagement, especially with suppliers, you know, teaching suppliers and consultants, contractors how to respond to those bid opportunities that have a social procurement piece. You know, there's the development and training of staff and counsel on, you know, how we go about doing this kind of thing. And there's also a great opportunity to network with other local governments similar size to us who, you know, who have gone down this path. So it's a really good forum for us. I mean, every 2 months we have a community of practice call. So we kind of share and network ideas, what we're doing in the social procurement area, which is very cool. So what does it cost? It's basically the membership fees based on, you know, what we pay the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. It's not a lot of money in the big scheme of things. The way the initiative actually got started with is they got a $200,000 grant through the Island Coastal Trust. So that money was put towards building this, and now it's just kind of taken a life of its own. So they're up to, I think, about 26 members now, and it's just only going to continue to build momentum. So again, back to the goal that Mayor Elliott and myself be appointed to the Coastal Community Social Procurement Initiative Steering Committee, as representatives of the district, and that Councillor Blank be appointed as alternative Mayor Elliott. And questions?
Right, well, thank you. We'll get you to take down that your presentation if you could, so I can see everybody, and then
stop share. There we go.
Thank you very much. Council, questions? Councillor Anderson.
Mr. Jeffery, in our procurement policy that we've recently adopted here in the District of Squamish, we have a definitions for local business, and it focuses on local business license. My question is, in your experience elsewhere on the island in particular, do municipalities, have they harmonized their local procurement policies on, for example, an issue like definition of local business? Is there harmonization of that level of policy between the different member municipalities?
Through the chair, thank you for that question. That's a great question. There is a lot of harmonization work going on around what you're discussing there. So some of the things they're doing at the moment is they're actually putting out like RFIs. They're calling it an RFI to the supplier community to create those short lists, and they're tailored to local businesses and all the local communities. So part of the scope of the initiative is to try and harmonize how we're approaching procurement, especially around things like what you're talking about, definitions of local, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of work that's already happened in that space that we're going to be piggybacking on and building upon from there.
That is in the interest of level playing field, if you like. I do have a couple of follow-up questions, Chair, but at your discretion.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
My second question is a matter I brought up when we discussed the local procurement policy, Mr. Jeffery, and that is the issue of unbundling, say, a construction project. There's a reference in your handout sheet to the District of Tofino and its unbundling of construction projects to include local vendors. Now, when we brought this up last time, you mentioned that there's another place to do this or to address this another way rather than spelling it out in a procurement policy. I wondered, with reference to the Tofino example, if you may be able to elaborate further on protocols and policies around unbundling of projects.
Thank you for that question again, through the chair. That's a great example of how to unbundle a bigger project and break it up into smaller packages to get more local suppliers to bid on the work. So basically, the easiest way of addressing that or dealing with that is through project delivery methodology. So some project delivery methods, like what we did on the fire hall, where you use a CCDC 5 CM at risk, it's called, where basically you're hiring a construction manager and they're going to break up all the construction packages. Instead of just getting a general contractor, you're actually bundling the packages up into smaller procurements so that it gives those local suppliers a better opportunity to bid on the work. That's kind of what they did in Tofino. They were able to break those bundles up into smaller packages. So we do have a couple of different delivery models we can use. The CDC 5B, 5A are the best models that are available to us, and we're kind of targeting the new public works building in a similar vein. We're probably going to do a very similar package to what we did for the fire hall and break it up into smaller packages for that reason. It kind of fits in nicely to our social procurement policy and, you know, what we kind of want to do in that space. So.
Thank you. Chair, I have a third question, but I can wait if you wish.
Yeah, Councillor Anderson, I'd like to remind not just you but the others. We'd like to try to keep this, if we can, to this steering committee initiative, and we do have some work to do yet to find propose an alternate. So that's the stuff that we need to. Although I appreciate the context, it gives us some ideas of what the types of things the steering committee will be working on. But we'd like to make sure that we can accomplish the business that's set out in the staff recommendation. So I'm going to move on for now, Councillor Anderson, and we can come back to you if you have some more.
Very good, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor French.
Thanks, Chair. My question really was quite high level and a little bit out of the scope, so I'll hold it. But I will take this opportunity to indicate that I am interested in sitting in that alternate position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor French. Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, thank you. The CCSPI, is it meant to stay just but focused on support information and so on for members, or is there a plan, or is it already doing sort of group purchasing, so collectively buying 100 EVs rather than each municipality under these policies buying their own EVs, for example?
Through the chair, they're not doing any group procurements as far as I know, or they haven't done one as of yet. Basically, they've been working more on policy, procedures, and templates to get everybody moving toward or in that same direction. So the RFI I mentioned about getting suppliers kind of pre-qualified within all the communities that are part of the initiative is moving it towards that kind of thing. So part of the initiative is giving us the opportunity to network with, you know, the cities of Victoria, Nanaimo, those on the Sunshine Coast, and start to think more big picture about what we want to do in that space jointly. Like it's a bit different from what they do in the Lower Mainland. We're kind of partnering with similar sized organizations, so it's easier to scale accordingly, you know, what tools, templates we're going to use in social procurement. So it's, for us, it's a better fit or a more natural fit to partner with these smaller, you know, municipalities rather than the Lower Mainland, because, you know, places like the City of Vancouver are big enough that they can resource themselves and they don't really care what we do, so to speak. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity for that. And that's kind of the driver about 2 years ago, especially at the political level with Mayor Helps and Mayor Josie and Tofino, was basically to try and get staff trained, all organizations, you know, working in that social procurement area and starting to do stuff more jointly together.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pettingill. Any other questions? Okay, Councillor, we're looking for, Councillor French has indicated that he's interested in sitting as the alternate on this committee. Is there anyone else that's interested in that position? Or Councillor Riggs, go ahead.
Well, no, I just actually had a question about the motion. I wasn't interested in being the alternate, but I'm just wondering if we want to add, or if we need to add a source of funding. Sometimes we do these things.
Did a certain Dilbert cartoon catch your attention? Who's best to answer that funding question?
I mean, I recognize it's a relatively small amount, but very often we do with these motions, when there is some cash involved in it, we highlight a source of funding. I mean, if there's nothing else, I'm happy to see it go from council contingency or something like that, but I didn't know if there was any other plan for that.
I think, no, that's a good point. I'd like to maybe, Ms. Glenda, do you have a funding source? question on this? Do we have...
Is Heather available?
Yeah.
I could take a crack at answering that.
Sure, yeah, we're all here. Go for it.
Okay, through the chair, I did speak to Mr. Russell about getting budget money for this, and because given the low dollar amount, he figured he could figure something out. So I haven't had any more detailed discussion than that with him, but yeah.
That's a good start, Mr. Jeffrey. Let's detailed response. Thank you.
Hi, through the chair. This is Heather Boxford. Sorry, I had a bit of a difficulty getting my video on. So currently, we looked at the source of funding as being absorbed in the operations under the finance cost center. So because it's such a relatively small amount, we can certainly put it through council contingency if that's the wish of council. But at this point in time, we do have it in the operations of the finance department.
Okay. Councillor Race, do you want to?
Well, if it's not necessary to put it in the motion, then I'm quite content with that. And I'll move it with Councillor French as the alternate.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Mayor Elliott seconds. Any comments? Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I think this is really exciting. Again, I've been quite jazzed about the whole social procurement thing the whole way along, and so I'm a bit jealous of Councillor French, but happy to support him in this role, and really excited to see our involvement in this. So thank you.
Mayor Elliott.
Yeah, I'm really glad that Mr. Jeffery weaseled his way back into the CCSPI. He was there in the early days, and it's nice to know that they've made room for another coastal community. And I think we can then influence some of our neighbors as well, which is the reason that I'm looking forward to serving on the committee in this first year for sure. Because I think it's so important, this movement towards social procurement, and we can do so much good with the dollars we spend. So I'm looking forward to bringing back what I learned from the steering committee to council and sharing that. As you can see, there are trainings coming up. So if people are interested, they should sign up. Thank you, Mr. Jeffery.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. Councillor French.
Thanks, Jerry. My question was around partnerships and potentially linking in with our municipal neighbors and also the Squamish Nation. And I think that there could be potential opportunities with First Nations partners through this as well. So I support the motion and look forward to the work that's ahead.
Thank you. I'd just like to say I'm excited about this social procurement as a whole, actually as a whole concept, and this is a great step, I think, forward so that we can really maximize the social good from the dollars, from the tax dollars that we spend from our community. So thank you so much for all your work on this, and I'm happy to have Councillor French there as the alternate as well. So with that. The question, any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
And I'd like the record show we're slightly ahead of schedule. Do you need anything else further from us, Mr. Jeffery? Awesome.
No, I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for the time.
Thank you very much. And Council, this time I'll entertain a motion to close. Councillor Stoner and Councillor Anderson. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're going to move to close. We're going to take let's do a 10-minute recess to get us back on time. So the staff that's going to need to be here for closed has time to do that. So we'll see you back at 3:30 in the closed link. Thank you.